Now let's move on to today's perspective. And right at the very heart of the protests in Belarus, now almost a month and a half old, of course, are the country's women. For a start, many of the protest leaders are women, but also many women just taking to the streets to protest themselves as well. Many of them dressed deliberately in long dresses, perhaps carrying flowers, playing, if you like, on the stereotypes of being a woman, as it makes it harder for security forces to tackle them, many even surrounding groups of men to try to stop them being arrested. With me to discuss women's role in the protests there and the protests as a whole is Anna Colin Lebedev. She's a researcher in post-Soviet political science here in Paris, who's also written a book on the movement of Mother of Russian Shoulders. Thanks very much for being with us on the programme. Let's start then by talking about that role of women. Why do you think so many women have been galvanised into taking part in these demonstrations?
Well, we should start with the leaders of the protest, the trio of women who made this protest possible by, let's say, informally winning the presidential election. Let's just remind that these three women became extremely popular and visible after their partners or their husbands have been jailed as candidates for the presidential election. So women replaced men, and this is how things started actually in Belarus, as women replaced men in the presidential campaign. Women also replaced men, let's say, or added their forces to men's forces in the streets. Just to let you imagine what the Belarusian society is. Belarusian society is quite women have a quite active part in the public life in all post-Soviet countries and in Belarus in particular. They are educated, they work, they take an active part in social movements. But there in the protest, their role became extremely specific, and there is something new about these women going in the streets.
So do you think then that there's become even more equality in the country? I mean, you say that women had a strong role, but would you say it's equal to the men now?
No, I think they have a strong role specifically because they do not claim they're equal or they are like the same political actors as men. They say we are different, but we act politically in a different way. This is why, as you mentioned, white dresses, flowers, all these femininity issues really emphasized by these women. Why? They're saying we are outside politics. Our concern is about stability, safety, future for our children, future for the country. We are pacific. We are not warriors. We do not want political careers. What we want is to live in a good country. So they go forward with this claim, which is an apolitical claim, but very political at the same time. And also, as there is this gallantry, I would say, very present in the Belarusian culture, and women are still considered as beings to be protected by men. This protected these protesters for a while. For example, police didn't attack them directly, didn't want to be shown beating women. But actually things are changing right now because these women are becoming more and more present, and as they are in the center of protest, repression against women is increasing also.
And is it also for the main leaders as well? I mean, you mentioned that a lot of the main leaders, men are in jail. We saw that incident last week with Maria Kalashnikova, where they tried to get her out of the country, but she ripped up her passport. I mean, do you think Lukashenko could start treating women in exactly the same way as their husbands have been treated?
This is possible for Lukashenko, of course. This is also possible for, let's say, military elite and police elite. But what about the ordinary policeman? For the ordinary policeman, this woman in front of him is still his mother, his sister, his friend, his neighbor. So this can make a difference. Maybe police forces will be less willing to put women in jail. Maybe also like authorities in jail institutions wouldn't know what to do with these women who obviously are not activists, violent protesters, etc. So it can make a difference.
What do you think the future is for the movement? I mean, 6 weeks in, it's certainly not showing any signs of diminishing at the moment. No matter how many leaders Lukashenko does silence, if you like, in whatever way he decides to do that, I mean, it appears that there is a real grassroots movement, doesn't it?
It is totally grassroots, and the fact of jailing leaders of the opposition doesn't make it weaker, because these figures, for example, as Maria Kolesnikova or Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, the president-elect, they are outside the country or in jail, but they are not the one animating the movement. The movement is created through small channels in social networks, through neighbors gathering. Now, for example, a new movement is emerging, a movement of IT professionals who started hacking state institutions. So the movement is very combined, very flexible, very fluid, and repression makes it, let's say, even more fluid and even more widespread in the country.
And let's talk about the news of the last 24 hours. Of course, this visit by Lukashenko to see Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin promising him this huge loan. Does that give Lukashenko the advantage once again, do you think? Will it make any difference, that loan?
Well, he's coming back with this loan, but this is a small loan, actually. Let's remember that this is the kind of loans he gets regularly, at least once a year from Russia. Not last year, but this is something this is a routine loan, I would say, from Russia to Belarus. And actually, the support, for example, of Vladimir Putin to Ukrainian former leader Yanukovych was much stronger in financial terms. So Russia supports Lukashenko, but supports him slightly. It's not a huge involvement. So of course Lukashenko is happy to be back with this money that will allow him, for example, to pay armed forces and to pay police authorities, to continue showing that the country is rolling. But this is not a game changer.
And just very briefly, I mean, Lukashenko himself has got other problems to deal with, hasn't he? I mean, notably the economic crisis in the country there.
The economic crisis will also make a difference, of course. It's increasing and going deeper and deeper in the Belarusian economy. This economic crisis is linked to the world economic crisis, to the relationships with Russia, but also to the current protest situation that makes the economy stop. So it can play both ways. On the one side, the discontent of the population will increase. On the other side, well, this is the moment when Russia can come as a savior with a bigger amount of money, right? And to support Lukashenko with more than a $1.5 billion loan. So we'll see. But obviously, in the long term, it will change a lot the political game there.
Great to talk to you today. Thanks very much. Anna Colin Lebedev, researcher in post-Soviet political science here in Paris. Thanks for being with us on the programme today. Main headlines then on Live from Paris. The United Arab Emirates and Bahrain had to sign their normalisation deal with Israel later at a White House ceremony hosted by Donald Trump. And global warming will reverse itself, says Trump, as he says it will soon get cooler again and dismisses climate change. That on a visit to California, where a series of ferocious fires continues to rage.